Good afternoon. Welcome to Reflections. My name is Patrick Tomlinson. I'm your host once again, and I'd like you to tune into a very exciting episode. Today we have a very interesting guest, Julian Jingles, also called Raymond Arthur Jingles, Reynolds. Julian is a writer, filmmaker, and an entrepreneur who operates in the United States, New York particularly, and Kingston, Jamaica. He began his writing career in 1966 at 16 years old, writing A Reason for Living, a novel about a family caught up in the revolution in Jamaica in the mid-1960s. It was written in 3 drafts and completed in 1968 at the tender age of 19 years old. Jingles, as I'd like to affectionately call him, is a past student of the famous Kingston College in Jamaica, in Kingston, Jamaica, and pursued a career in journalism at the Gleaner Company. He was a writer, writing extensively on several genres, including cultural and social issues. In 1972, Jingles immigrated to the United States to write 2 screenplays, one called Half Breed, which is a Western, and the other one called One Way Out, about the Jamaican-American drug connection. He has written extensively for numerous publications, including the Amsterdam News, the Weekly Gleaner, the New York Daily News, and several other publications. He wrote syndicated columns on Our Story, Our World, another one called Point Blank, and a third called In Silhouette in the 1990s and 2000s. Julian is a great lover of film and television, and he received his training in script writing and film production with the National Academy of Television and Arts. He has produced several musical and film works. From 1992 to 2016, he wrote in the In Focus section of the famous Jamaica Sunday Gleaner, and also has written for the Jamaica Observer. He has been also associated with the National Minority Business Council in New York here, and acted as a consultant to several business and trade delegations to Jamaica and other Caribbean nations. He is married, and he is the father of 3 grown children and 11 grandchildren. Julian resides in the Bronx, New York, and I'd like to welcome you, Julian Jingles,
Thank you
for
so
taking the
much.
time out to come and be with us on Reflections.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
the invitation, Patrick.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
I'd first like to start with your early years in Jamaica, where you grew up. I know you have very strong connections with downtown Kingston.
Yes.
So would you like to tell us about your family, your time growing up in Kingston?
Yes. Thanks for the opportunity. Very interesting times. I was born in the late 40s, and so I am a child of the 50s and a teenager of the 60s.
Okay.
And also traversed from, I actually was born in an area in downtown Kingston called Fletcher's Land.
I know Fletcher's Land.
Which is just south of the Kingston Racecourse.
Mm-hmm.
And grew up all over, from Jonestown in the west to Rallington Town, Vineyard Town in the east. My formative years, though, I would say as a teenager, was spent mostly in eastern Kingston, in Rallington Town.
Okay.
But like I said, I covered from the waterfront. Also, I was exposed from a very early age to the music. I was always exposed to the music. My father, who was a port worker and a trade unionist,
What's his name?
They call him Roy Reynolds, but he's Edmund. And on the waterfront where he worked as a port worker, they called him Churchill,
Churchill.
because of, I guess, his leadership. And he always was smoking a pipe.
Mm.
But he loved music, especially the horns. I remember as a child, one of the very first concerts, he took me at the Kingston race course. I think it was with Louis Satchmo Armstrong.
He visited Jamaica?
Yeah, man. Back in the late 50s or mid 50s, 57, 50 thereabout. I was a child. I remember my dad having me on his shoulders in race course, taking in the great Satchmo. So he loved music, and I can always remember that I was exposed to music. Jazz was my first love, and it stuck with me. And also, I went to, interestingly, I just mentioned it on Facebook, I went to the first school that I attended. I was very young. The teacher, the headmistress for that school, because we were living in a yard in Fletcher's Land where I was born, and my mother had us to go to work because she wanted us to get out and do something. As a factory worker, I always have pride, and I mentioned that I was really a true product of the working class, because my father was a port worker, which ends in worker, and my mother was a factory worker, which, so I couldn't escape the working class fixture on me. But I'm very proud and I love it, you know. An only child, only for both. But my father had a daughter who was much older, but she didn't live with us outside of the marriage. But I was exposed to a lot, you know, conversations, politics. I was exposed to, they didn't hide things from me. And there were always books in my household. Another very impacting experience I had was that members of my family were Cubans. My mother's eldest sister married to a Cuban, and he was very close to me, he was my godfather. And so he read a lot.
And he was living in Jamaica at the time?
He was living, yes. He had left Cuba, and he was working as a, you know, Cubans are noted for being top mechanics. He was a machinist, and he worked with a company that is now Seprod. My mother also worked there, but he dealt with the machines. But he was a voracious reader. He and my cousin, who died about a year ago, he went to St. George's College, Rolando, La Veste. They were La Veste. But I was exposed and encouraged to read, and read adult books, novels, from I was a child. I was groomed on Ring magazine, you know, the boxing magazine that came out of the U.S. My father, from I was 6 years old, I remember I was living in right at the border of Franklin Town and Rollington Town at, I think it was 1A Lincoln Road. And I remember clearly I was about 6 when my father had the Star, the person who sold the Star in the neighborhood. He made sure that I started to get the Star at that age. So I was always exposed to adult reading, you know, and conversations. And so it stuck with me. I went to Foresters Hall, the first school, as I was saying, which was a lodge hall on North Street, right at the corner of North Street and Love Lane. But it served as a lodge hall for the Foresters, and it was also on the weekend, it was the #1 dance hall in Jamaica. And for that, could be the world, maybe the first dance hall. So on Saturday nights, the big sounds, you know, the Treasure Isle, Duke Reed, Cox and Dodd, sound system, King, what was his name? King Edwards.
Oh.
These were the big sound systems. So I was groomed on that. When I went to school on a Monday, you would see the hand cart, which called the Dre cars, coming to move the sound boxes from Foresters Hall. So it served as a dance hall on the weekends, as a lodge hall, and as a school for, you know, young kids, again exposed to the music. So the music has always been
a part
of me growing up.
Okay.
And,
so what elementary school did you go?
I went to, after Foresters Hall, I went to a school in Jonestown. I think it's on Penn Street. And interestingly, somebody told me recently, I forgot the name, that the school still existed, was still functioning, and this is like from 1953, 54. But it wasn't it wasn't an elementary school. It was well, we knew it as government schools at the
Right.
time. And then I moved from West Kingston, from Jonestown. I live again back to the music. I also Jonestown was another mecca for Jamaican music. The birthplaces of like sound system. So I remember as a child, like on a Tuesday, one of the well-known sound system would string up a few doors away from where I was living. And again, it's during the week, it's not weekend, but again, the music was penetrating always. And that's why my wife and I, years after, we would look at the world cultural scene, and we insisted that the African Americans, the Jamaicans, and the South Africans are the most musical people in the world. I've never seen anybody dancing to go to war like the South Africans.
Exactly.
You know what the music has done to the African American experience. Tremendous. Also, and again to the music, apart from the United States, Jamaica is the only country in the world, and Kingston is a city for that, that has given the world more than one popular genre of music.
Which is, or which are?
Beginning with ska, which penetrated the entire world.
Right.
Rocksteady, reggae, and now dancehall, because these are four genres that all came out of Kingston as popular music that penetrated the entire world. The United States is the only other country, and the United States, that was more than one city. In the Jamaican experience, it all came out of Kingston. In the American experience, you had jazz, you had country, you had blues, you had rhythm and blues, which came from different parts of the United States. But no other country has done that. No other country. So that is one of the things I feel, and those of us who follow the culture, feel that makes Jamaica that special mold. There's something about them that really, drive them to that. But then back to the school, I went to elementary school in East Kingston, Ellison Primary School, government school, which is in Brownstown, right on the border of Raytown and Brownstown. That's where I went to elementary school.
Do you remember any of your early teachers who impacted you?
As a matter of fact, I acknowledge and give them big shout outs in my novel because they certainly had a tremendous impact on
your
me,
life.
believe you. I remember one in particular. She died in Canada. She went to live in Canada. Her name was Maud Fuller. I don't know, you should know because you look at the same age realm as I am. But Maud Fuller played a character, Liza Longtongue, in Lou and Rani show. Back in the 50s, 60s.
Right.
And she was my she was one of my teachers. But she was the one who really even groomed me to take the common entrance exam.
Right.
To go to Kingston College. From Ellison Primary.
Right.
Yeah. At Ellison, I was exposed again to both the music and to sports. Extraordinary, tremendous talent came out of those environments. Because, as I said, Ellison is right at the corner of Winter Road.
Right, I know.
Apart, and over the other side is Bellevue and Paradise Street. So you had Raytown, you had Brownstown, you had down South Side and all that. And they produced some remarkable talent in terms of music. And I remember too, the first time I was exposed that I can recall to the Rastafari religion and movement was from a duo that was known. They were one of the first recording duos in the Jamaican music scene, Bonnie and Skitter. Now, they lived in East Kingston, and one of them, I think it was Skitter or Bonnie, one of them, had a girlfriend who went to my primary school. So, I'm talking about, I was like maybe 8, 9, 10. And when he was recording at Clement Dodd's studio, Coxson's studio. And I remember clearly and distinctly to this day when he did a major recording and he and Bonnie, his partner, came to see his girlfriend. I think her name was Barbara. She was a light burn. And he was telling us about Rastafari and the music. And I, as a kid, you know, this is a guy who's recording music, a bigger man to me. But I gravitated to them, and then they were telling us as youngsters what Hail Rastafari and all of that. This was about 1957, 58. So I was really exposed to the culture deeply from I was a child. And I guess many years later, my mother would sometimes drive me, God rest her soul, that I couldn't escape the music because all around me, even where I was living in Fletcher's Land, was across the street from where I was, you know, grew up as a child, was another famous dance hall known as Caterers. And on Friday and Saturday night, it was music. Now here I am, a little kid, little baby, you know, with my mom. My father is out enjoying himself. But the music was penetrating me from that just across the street at John's Lane. So it's intrinsic.
Okay. So you took the common entrance and you moved on to Kingston College.
Yes.
Okay. What was that like?
Extraordinary experience.
You want to tell us a little bit about that? Like, do you have any recollections of your first day there and some of the first impressions that you had?
Yeah, at KC? Well, Kingston College, I don't want for someone to believe that because I went there. I mean, you went to Woolman's, you told me, you know, and there's always. But the thing with Kingston College is that I think that it had a wider, larger intake of working class boys. And for that reason, there was always this strong identity with rootsiness. You know, the class thing is always very evident and very much part of the Jamaican.
How did Casey have to break that down in your estimation, if it did
Well,
any
just
way?
by having so many of us coming from a working class experience.
Right. And we were bright boys too.
Extremely. You know, extremely. I mean, they were, and again, some people may say that I'm being biased because I went to Jamaica, I went to KC in the 60s. I went to KC, I think, 61. I left in fifth form in 66 because I had the writing bug. I didn't want to stay to go to university and all that. I just wanted to go and write. But I was exposed to some tremendous talent that inspired me then, because remember at that time KC was dominant in football, which is our soccer here.
Right.
Cricket, track and field, even tennis. Two of the greatest tennis players as youngsters came from KC, which was Richard Russell and Lumsden,
right.
Lance. So,
and they went to KC also? Okay.
Yeah, Richard and Lance went to Kingston College. As a matter of fact, when I went there as a child, as a youngster, age 11, they taught me, they tried to teach me tennis. That's lawn tennis. So we had a wonderful exposure to great talent, music. I am always very proud to say that I was at school at the same time with one of the greatest musicians ever come out of Jamaica, which is Jackie Mitu.
Okay, another Kingston College.
Yeah, Mitu again was someone who was so possessed and obsessed with the music that he would leave class, skip out of school, and third and fourth form, to go and record music at Coxsone Studio up at Brentford Road, and became one of the #1 world-recognized organists and musicians.
Did you participate in anything musical at Kingston College?
They tried me for the choir, but I didn't have a cut.
Yeah.
I was very much into sports, though. I didn't represent the school.
But you played sports?
But I played, yeah.
What sports did you like playing?
A little cricket, but I was really, I considered myself a footballer.
Oh, okay.
And until this day, there are people who tell me that when we had like form matches, they feared because I played, and I was a chubby kid, but I was quick.
What position you played?
Inside right or inside left.
Okay, so you're a striker.
So I was next to the striker.
Yes.
So I was always there, and
okay.
I went to school with that great 1964-65 team.
You want to name some of them?
Neville Oxford, Alan Skill Cole,
right?
Boywood Friends, the great Tony Keys. as some of the people, many, Mouse, Mickey Vernon, Mouse Brown, Franklin Morant, some fantastic players, Dennis Johnson, who was a skipper.
And he was a track coach too, right?
Who?
Dennis Johnson.
No, that's another that's another Dennis Johnson.
Okay.
He was actually an athlete.
Oh,
the
he's
other
a-
one.
okay.
He was a 100-yard sprinter.
Right, I think I.
The one I went to school with, he was mainly he captained the top champion Kingston College team
Right.
back in the 60s. So we, speaking for myself, I was very much inspired by the outstanding dominance of the brothers that I went to school with in that period of time. Really.
Very good. So it shaped you and prepared you
It did.
later for life.
I think so. I think so because it exposed me to many things. It exposed me to understand the dynamics of living with other people, of interacting. We had excellent teachers led by a man who had a tremendous impact on me. Was our headmaster then, the great Douglas Forrest, God rest his soul. Not only academically, but I remember at age 14, when I was at Casey, I had teachers who was teaching me us philosophy. You know?
Could you recall some of the names?
There was one in particular.
Philosophy.
Philosophy.
Wow.
I had a teacher. He was a math teacher. Up to in December when I did a book launch in Kingston, they reminded me of his name. But he was like, whenever the regular teacher didn't come for a class, he substituted.
Right.
But he was a math teacher. But he didn't teach us math.
He taught
He
you
taught us
philosophy.
philosophy.
Oh, this is
And
very-
until this day, I remember one of the major existentialism, solipsism, you know, I'll never forget that teaching.
At that level?
At that
That's
level,
remarkable.
Yeah. And when I was in fourth form at Casey, we were exposed, Mr. Forrest made sure that there was a period when we listened just to classical music, opera, you know, rather than if a teacher didn't, he would gather the classes that the teacher may not be there for that thing.
Right.
And we would go into the assembly hall and he would play Aida or Carmen and we discussed classical music.
Wow.
I remember Mr. Forrest too, I wrote about it.
In your
more
book.
than once, yeah. I remember I gave the lines to a female character in my novel. But I'll never forget Douglas Forrest telling us how he expects us to grow up as men. And he said, never take on the attitude that it is me and my wife, my son and his wife, we four and no more. Never forget that. He says we are to broaden, we are to democratize our relationships, we are to open up, to give other people opportunity and don't just lock it down narrowly, myopically, to say, well then, you know, my family thing. And that stuck with me forever. Forever.
Which you have lived out even in the years after.
Precisely.
Well, I see that you have such a phenomenal encyclopedic knowledge of the music industry, Jingles, and the time is down on us, but wanted you to tell us in the 1 or 2 minutes remaining your recommendation or what would you leave to the viewing public or the generation coming up as to your experiences and what you'd like to share with them from your early and formative years growing up in Jamaica and what it taught you. How it
In a
shaped you.
word, love.
That's powerful.
In a word, love. It has always been around me, it has guided me, and it continued even to the relationship I had with my wife who left me last year after 49 years. And I thank you, and I came back, went to Jamaica, and I came back and just spent my time with my children, my 11 grandchildren and 1 great-grand.
Wow.
And it's all love, you know, the strength of the love, and even going back to KC and the relationship you cannot be selfish.
And you still maintain connections with Jamaica because you told me you're traveling
Yeah, man,
this
I'm
weekend.
going down this weekend. I'm in Jamaica working on projects.
Right, which we'll talk about if you decide to come back.
Yes.
We'll delve a little bit more into your connections to Jamaica and the musical
Cultural.
things that you are involved in and your business endeavors.
Very much. I really do appreciate the opportunity very much. But again, it's love. I learned that from my own family experiences. I learned that through Rastafari because I was very much exposed to the Rastafari movement. It shaped me a lot as a youngster. I mean, there were so many things happening, and you needed guidance. We had the soul, we had the brotherly love, the understanding that it's not just you alone. You know, you have to, I guess that's why really we were so much involved in sports, because it's a team effort. You know, when I look at like that powerful Kingston College football team of the 60s, it was all team effort. It was, you know, individual, but it had to come together to really achieve the common objective, which is to be a winner. But to do that, you had was to work as a team.
Well, Jingles, a phenomenal story, and I want to thank you for taking, at such short notice, to come out and to share with us, share with the viewers your story. And I think it's a phenomenal story. Hopefully we'll get you to come back again to speak to us a little bit more about your later projects and like.
And
I thank you so much
for
again, Brother Jingles.
Thank
you for coming.
Peace and love.
Blessings.
Yes. And half hour went quickly.
I am enraged, I crackled, I sparkled, I flared up. I am in that fire. You won't be able to put me out. I am blazing fierce. I am stoked in every step. The more I step, the hotter I get. I'm a burning.